I think that brand loyalty is completely dead. I don't believe in brand loyalty anymore. You didn't have so many options. There were not a lot of options in the past. So, of course, you were growing up with a product and then there was a certain loyalty to it. You weren't changing so much.
If you're running paid social ads, you'll know that creative is the variable. Knowing what creative is working, what's not, and how to develop more winning ads is so dependent on understanding actual creative performance at a granular level. At Fly Performance, we use motion for all of our creative reporting. It's frankly transformed our ability to develop, find, and scale more winning ads, driving more revenue and more profit for our clients. Motion empowers your creative and marketing teams with the data they need to make the right decisions through visualized and easily digestible, customizable reporting that clearly identifies the key drivers of creative performance, taking the guesswork out of creative to generate more revenue from your paid social ads. If you're ready to learn how the best DTC and e-commerce brands use Motion to ship winning Meta, TikTok, and YouTube ads, book a demo today or create a free account at motionapp.com. Even better than that, Motion offers a monthly subscription plan so you can dodge all those annoying annual contracts. It's a common phrase in e-commerce that creative wins the click, your landing pages seal the conversion. If you want to convert more paid traffic, you need to own and optimize your post-click experience. One of the best solutions we've found at Fly Performance has been Format. Format's drag and drop no-code builder lets your marketing team create funnels the same way they create ads. From dynamic landing pages to targeted PDPs, custom carts, Format enables you to convert more paid traffic by experimenting and owning your post-click experience. Learn more at formatcommerce.com. That's Format, F-E-R-M-A-T, commerce, C-O-M-M-E-R-C-E.com. Managing your influence and creator marketing doesn't have to be a headache. At Fly Performance, we use Incense. Incense is a one-stop shop to discover and collaborate with creators to produce UGC content for organic social and increase your advertising performance through whitelisted ads on Instagram and Spark ads on TikTok. After trying several other solutions, we landed on Incense, and it's proven to be by far the best platform for streamlining and simplifying the entire process from discovery, briefing, launching ads, and managing payments. Our teams and clients love it. If you're working with influencers and creators to produce user-generated content for your brand or business, you should definitely check them out. You can learn more by going to incense.pro. That's Incense, INSCNSE.pro.
Welcome back to Bite Size. I'm very, very excited today. I've got Oana, a phenomenal marketer, on the pod. We were just having a pre-chat to the podcast, already talking about some really exciting things that are true to my heart, the convergence of brand and performance and consumer-led marketing. So Oana, pleasure to have you on. Let's kick off, for anyone who doesn't know you, with a 5-minute career story, where you started, and more recently, and as we were just talking about, some very exciting news as to what you're currently up to.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting. I'm a big fan of the pod. Well, just a very top line, I have started my career in entertainment. My first job was at Disney. I always talk about that because, imagine to start your marketing career at Disney. It's the best place ever because that's where marketing is really born. That's where it was born, and that's where they know how to really do it. And it's all about magic, and, it's not selling any product, but it's about selling the magic. So I always go back to that as the first ever, job that I've ever had. And it was so exciting. That actually was in Spain. I used to live in Madrid for 14 years. So shout out to my Spanish friends. And I've spent some years in entertainment and consumer products and licensing, going from Disney to Warner Brothers to Paramount. So I've kind of like touched on the big three, entertainment brands out there. And then I moved into fashion. I work for a Spanish brand in Spain, which is called Springfield. And then about 10 years ago, one of the best career moves of my life has been starting to work for Puma in Germany. So I've changed not only, the company, but also the country. And it's been an amazing ride. I've led the marketing team for business unit accessories for the last 4 years. And it's been super exciting to build up that strategy, especially in connection to the whole sneakerhead industry and how to connect that with the headwear and the accessories that they wear. So that has been phenomenal. I've had an amazing team there. I've had an amazing experience. And recently, I've decided to leave that amazing experience that I've had, which has taken me a lot of effort to actually get to that decision. And I'm literally in the process of founding my own brand evolution lab, which I'm going to be launching in the next few weeks. So I'm very excited about all that and very excited to chat to you about all this.
Likewise, quite the track record with some of those companies, which is amazing. So much to learn that we probably won't get through all of it on this podcast. Let's actually go straight into the new company that you're setting up, because I think that's a really interesting turn in your career and based on kind of your insights and learnings that you've established from working through those companies. And again, talking to you before we kicked off, something very close to my heart. So what sparked that move, and talk more about what brand evolution means and kind of how you see the dynamics of brand marketing shifting that you're looking to capitalize on through the new company that you're creating.
Yeah, so there's always two aspects of it. I will start with the more personal aspect, and then I'm going to touch on the business aspect. And I think the two kind of intertwine really well. So on the personal aspect, I would say that I've always loved to look at marketing very holistically. So even if I've had roles that were very specific and, in big companies, they're very siloed, right? You're not able to really work holistically across the company. So you're assigned in a department, in a certain segment, so you need to focus on that. My philosophy has always been, like 360. Whatever I was doing for accessories, for example, at Puma was from the lens of brand. And I think that was always a big thing for me. And I was always preaching it to, my team members as well. It doesn't make sense to do something just for one department without thinking broader about the brand. So that has always been a very big focus for me. On the other side, from a business perspective, I would say that one thing that I've observed over the years in all the different companies that I've been at is that the larger the company, the more difficult it is for it to evolve at the pace that the market is moving at and at the pace that the consumers are moving at. So I think that from that perspective, I always questioned myself as a marketer, how I can, develop myself, evolve my knowledge so that I can help the brand. But on the other side, there's always this question mark of like, how can we help the brand move quicker? How can we help the brand evolve quicker and keep the pace of the reality that we're in? So, when I left Puma and I've started to think about what was going to be my next step, it was very clear to me that brand evolution was going to be it, because it has to do with the evolution of the marketers, behind the brand. And it also has to do with the evolution of how the brand per se kind of, takes shape. And I think that the two things are connected, because you can't expect the brand to evolve if the marketers themselves don't evolve first. And so I think that what I'm very passionate about doing in the next phase of my career is to help those two areas, to help marketers understand what they're not seeing yet, what it's new and what are the different areas that they've not explored yet. But on the other side, how can we actually help strategically brands to take the next step in a very mindful way, in a very aligned way to how consumers are, shifting as well, and a very quick pace right now.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about those consumer shifts, what have they been? I think, there's lots and there's many, and it seems to be speeding up. But when you say consumer shifts, and what have you experienced, and what do you think the shifts are going to continue to present in terms of challenges and opportunities for brands?
Yeah, so that's actually the biggest thing. This is the biggest opportunity that I think I've noticed, I've observed, and this is why I'm so excited about what I'm building, is because I think the next phase is all about digital value creation as opposed to a traditional exchange of value as we know it. And I just basically today I launched my latest newsletter about this topic. Coca-Cola and Microsoft just recently announced a $1 billion agreement over the next 5 years. And if you think Microsoft, it's not just Microsoft, it's OpenAI. And so you can imagine how that transformation is going to look like, powered by AI in a big corporation as Coca-Cola. Now, nobody seems to have noticed this, and I haven't seen anyone really from the marketing sphere, talk about it. It seemed more to be as a tech news, but I interpret it as a big shift in mindset for brands like Coca-Cola, and I think bigger, other big brands are going to, follow suit, because, here's the deal. The way you can understand that agreement between Coca-Cola and Microsoft is like this. In the past, brands and consumers who used to interact in a very traditional way. So if I'm a brand and I'm creating a product, it used to be that I would buy consumer insights to understand what you as a consumer are into. And then I would develop a product for you based on those needs that I find through data. And then I would create that product. I would sell it to you. You'd buy it from me. And then I would, create again another product. And then the cycle would continue. Now, about 10 years ago, with the boom of social media, what we've seen is that consumers have become creators. And at the beginning, it was just a handful of people that were influencers, and it wasn't so accessible for everyone to create content. The platforms were not so developed. Smartphones were not so developed. However, fast forward to today, you, me, your neighbor, your cat, your dog, your baby, anyone, you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company is a content creator. And so I think that is the biggest shift that I think brands don't really internalize as much. So they still think about influencers and them as, product creators. But I look at it as in there's a huge value exchange shift in, with regards to that, because all of a sudden consumers now own their data. Actually, consumers know better their followers than brands do. And so they own the data, that data. They not only get paid, they not only get free product from you as a brand, but they also are going to be able very soon to sell you that data directly. And so when you think about, the fact that at scale, 1 billion people around the world or 8 billion people around the world have access to internet and have access to this technology, the bigger question for me is, where does brand loyalty, stay within that equation? Because if I, as a brand, I'm going to not be able to just simply sell you the product, but you're going to have to be influenced. You're going to have to be paid. I'm going to have to buy your data. There's going to be a whole different level of exchange of value in between us. And then I think brands will have to shift as well in not just consuming data, but becoming data creators. And that can be done through IP creation that is digital, that is scalable, that doesn't have a cap. And obviously, you have to do it by being relevant, which, you and I know that, with social media is absolutely crucial today.
Yeah, there's a lot there. When you say about brand loyalty shifts, what do you mean by that exactly? Do you mean there's less loyalty? There'll be less loyalty from a brand perspective with their consumers?
I mean, maybe a little dramatic, but the way that I want to say is that I think that brand loyalty is completely dead. I don't believe in brand loyalty anymore. You didn't have so many options. There were not a lot of options in the past. So, of course, you were growing up with a product, and then there was a certain loyalty to it. You weren't changing so much. You were buying a pair of sneakers and you were wearing them until they were worn out. And of course, you were loyal to them. You had so many memories attached to that product. But now with consumerism, with so many options of product and brands out there, with, TikTok made me buy this and that and the other, well, it's just not possible to retain that level of loyalty just because we want so many things. We change things so quickly. And of course, there's different components. It's not completely true that it's that. I think, I want to make a point here, but I think, of course, there are examples where maybe a Louis Vuitton bag, you pay a lot more money for that bag. It's not so attainable. So, of course, you put more care into it. Maybe you wear it a bit more, and maybe you like that brand more. But when I think about maybe 90% of the brands out there and the products that we consume, it's just not possible to be loyal to one single brand because, trends are changing fast. As I said, consumerism is the highest point right now. And we as consumers have changed a lot as well. So yeah, I just don't believe it exists anymore.
That is a big, bold statement. That's there you go. There's the title for the podcast. Brand loyalty is dead. So
quote me.
And I think to a degree, and it's a big challenge for brands, right? It's for many reasons, because customer acquisition costs rising. How do you, as you scale, continue to find new pockets of consumers and do that in a profitable way? So brand loyalty is seen as the more predictable path of growth, right? If we can just keep these people coming back, then it will offset our acquisition costs. But to your point, in a world where there's more options, everyone's a creator. If there's more people also being sent free product and establishing partnerships with different brands. So how do brands either solve for that, or how do they adapt to that?
I think that the way brands solve for this is building a pipeline of consumers, of new consumers. I'm not really sure how much you can have consumers come back over and over and over. I think this is where I think this part of brand loyalty, I don't really believe in it anymore, just because I think consumers have too many options. And so at scale, I don't really think that's possible. So I think that's where the biggest issue with growth is, because you can't really, expect consumers to come back. And I don't think you can bet on it as a brand. So there's a few ways. One is you need to build a pipeline of new consumers. And we talk about Gen Z all the time, but I think we're not speaking enough about Gen Alpha and how we're going to engage them properly from the beginning. And when we say brand loyalty, remember, we talked about how you were buying a pair of sneakers when you were younger and you had those memories. And are we building those memories for Gen Alpha right now? Right? No matter what the product is. So that's one thing. If you're not building that relationship right now, that emotional connection, when they grow older, are they going to come and, look for your brand? Well, this is a big, big topic. And then the other thing is, obviously, there's different type of brands out there in the world, but I would say, you have to look at different pockets of consumers, as you said. And so, different maybe niches that you have not tapped into before. And obviously, bigger brands do that all the time. I think they're maybe a little undervalued, in my opinion. So, for example, when you think about women in sports, that's one example. But just women consumers in certain types of, industries, they're not as considered as you would think. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for brands to really look thoroughly into where they're positioned and if there's any opportunities for them to go into segments that they haven't been really approaching so closely before. But I would say building the pipeline is the most important part for me.
Building the pipeline, and I agree with you. I'm always conscious of these statements because it's very different for bigger brands versus smaller brands. One of the challenges, smaller brands have is, well, building that pipeline requires investment that doesn't show me a return today. It's slightly easier for larger brands because they don't necessarily need that, right? Because they already have a sizable business, so they can make those investments. But I think that's where it comes down to, something we briefly touched upon before we started and what I kind of got as well from what you're looking to do with this new venture is making that more holistic approach, right? It's brand, it's performance, it's not separate. They work in unison. So maybe from your experience, maybe with the larger brands you work with, but what advice would you give for smaller brands as to, maybe help me even just champion this mindset of you have to be looking to build that pipeline. You can't just rely on, well, if we think loyalty is decreasing and then just relying on more kind of lower funnel marketing. So how would you think about that? What's your approach to that more holistic standpoint that brands should be thinking about?
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's easy for me to say, having worked for bigger brands, I think it's easier to think about the long term as it is for the smaller brands. But I want to quote a study that I came across recently, and this study is commissioned by ThinkBox. But it's independently analyzed, uses data from Ubiquity, Essence Mediacom, Game Theory, and it's called the Profitability 2. So basically it found that advertising on average has a short-term profit of 1.87 per pound invested, which increases to 4.11 when sustained effects up to 24 months are included. So the longer you wait for that investment, to take kind of a bit of a rolling, speed, the more ROI you're getting from that investment. So more interestingly, the study shows that 58% of advertising total profit generation happens after the first 13 weeks. So clearly it shows that, the more you wait, the more ROI you're getting on your investment, So I think that it's a really tough one for smaller brands, but I would say, being patient and understanding that investment will eventually pay off is so crucial. I speak to a lot of new founders and new brands as well. Sometimes they're reaching out for advice, and I see that they're so impatient. That somebody just this week was telling me, I cannot wait for things to happen. Things needs to happen like now. Otherwise, I'm just like going crazy. I'm like, I get it, but things just don't work this way. This is not how you build a brand. There's a short term and there's a long term. And you talked about performance and brand. And those two things come together all the time. They're intertwined. You cannot have one without the other. So I would just say, being patient and invest well, invest smartly. I think that's a big one for me. And I think maybe one point to make here, having worked in big companies, I come from Eastern Europe and I have this, mindset of do more with less. Like on a personal level, this is how I was brought up. In big companies, typically you have big budgets. I've never been a fan of thinking with a big budget mindset. So I've always loved to work with very, very, very tight budgets and achieve more by thinking creatively and out of the box. And this has been huge for me and my team in the last 4 years in accessories, for example, where it was a smaller team with a smaller budget, but we still were able to do a lot because we thought about storytelling, because we thought about, holistically about the brand, and because we looked at investment very, very smartly. So I think it's possible. And especially with AI, I think is going to be a game changer for smaller companies.
I definitely agree with you. It's, like I said, true to my heart. I came out of working with huge companies as well and was somewhat shocked and disillusioned as to how separate everything was. And the brand team worked completely independently to the performance team, and it was so fragmented. I also just think that approach, it's not putting the consumer first, right? It's allowing yourself to operate in the confines of how the business or agency or brand or budgets are split versus how do we maximize the impact of the brand, right?
I mean, this topic of being consumer first, it's a very, very sensitive topic for me because I think that we say it a lot, and I think that we all as marketers genuinely believe it. But then the reality of it is that if you would really, really want to be consumer centric, you wouldn't start with the product first. You would start with the consumer first. So if you take the normal workflow of any company is, okay, we sit in a meeting room, we think about the new, the new collection or whatever the products are that we're developing. We're taking some consumer insights, and then we're developing the product. We're creating the marketing strategy and the campaigns, and then we're rolling them out to the markets or to the consumers, through the different channels. But already that workflow is not consumer centric in itself, because if you really want to be consumer centric, you would start with the question, where are consumers today? And you have to ask that question every single season before you start developing anything. And you would have to think about how have consumers evolved over the last 12 months? What changes have happened on social media over the last 12 months? What big cultural shifts or moments have happened? So it's actually the process would have to start with a lot of questioning before you start rolling the dice on product creation. And I think realistically, especially in bigger companies, that's just not possible because you have a whole system, that you have to work through. And there's like a huge amount of stakeholders and departments that you need to coordinate. It's just really very complex. But I agree with you. I think that to be consumer centric, you need to question a lot more things on a daily basis before you actually start to create anything.
Yeah, an opportunity for the brands of the now to become the brands of the future, right?
I agree. And I think that in general, I would say we don't need more brands. We need better brands. I love to say that. It's a little bit the motto of my new company, because I think, as much as we all want to make, profit, and I want to make a little sort of parenthesis here to say, I think we should all remember that we're here to sell as marketers. We're not here to create nice stories and nice visuals and nice campaigns just for the sake of creativity. Creativity without a business is just, you're losing your time. Like in the end, yes, you're enjoying it on a personal level, but we're here to sell. And I am big on that. I mean, my biggest objective as a marketer is I want the company to sell. I want my department to sell. I want my team to be successful. And so with that in mind, I think that, there needs to be a bigger shift in how marketers think in the first place, because I think we need to question more things. In order for brands to grow and scale and become better, we as marketers, as I said at the beginning, I think we need to become better. We need to question more. We need to understand more. We need to be closer to consumers. And I think it's very hard to do that if you're not a practitioner. If you don't practice marketing like you do, like I do, I think it's very, very difficult.
I'm glad you mentioned that statement actually about marketers, we're here to sell, because I think there's a perception, maybe legacy perception, that that's what the selling is, the dirty part of marketing, right? Let's leave that to the direct response teams and everything else. But really, if you think about it, you're right. Why do you even do brand marketing? It's not to just sit back and celebrate your creativity and be like, oh, doesn't that look cool? You're doing it to unlock something within potential consumers that you hope will then ultimately make them become a customer of the brand, right? So what I love about that is, and I don't want to categorize you because you just stated you're not, but you could be perceived as more of a brand marketer, right? So it's really good to hear even brand marketers like yourself talk about, we do brand marketing, we do storytelling, but it's to sell, it's to drive sales.
Exactly. And what is brand marketing? It's really building reputation, and reputation has been selling for thousands of years. It's nothing new. I mean, it's one of the oldest crafts in the world. You're building something up, you're building a circus, and you're building it, close to the town. You want the people in the town to hear about the circus so they can come and pay you to see the show, right? So this is exactly the same. You're building reputation for someone to know about you in a better way, in a closer way, so that they can come and, buy something from you or interact with you in whatever way, whatever your business is all about. So, that's the thing, though, that I have to say. A lot of brand marketers talk about just branding, and they talk about the philosophy of branding and the theory of branding. And I'm more of a practical brand marketer. I want to see the KPIs. I want to see the long-term objectives, and I want to see the results as well, because I think that's why we're getting paid for,
Could not agree more. You talk a lot about storytelling, which I think is a big component of a brand, as you said, like building that reputation. How do you think about storytelling? How should brands think about storytelling? I had this conversation with someone the other day about, it's really the nucleus of a brand. Like, why does it exist? And I think where many brands struggle is finding, if there's not that reason for existing, you're almost manufacturing a story around the brand or the product, right? So, and I think that's where maybe really authentic brands might excel over brands that's just, well, we just happen to have a product. What's your approach or take on storytelling? And for anybody who's listening to this, who's maybe struggling with, well, how do I bring that out of my brand? Like, how do I do that in a more tactical way? What advice would you give?
Well, I mean, one word, which is unmatched. And I think this is the word that encapsulates for me the whole essence of how you should position yourself in the market. Unmatched, not different, not better, not more beautiful or nicer or thinner or taller or whatever it is. Distinct. What is distinct? What is different? What is better? they're all very subjective terms. When I think about Unmatched, and this is why I'm writing a book about it, is I think all those different things that make you you, that nobody else can do in the same way that you do. And this is exactly why someone is drawn to your brand in the first place. Because, as we said, there's a ton of options right now in the market. There's a ton of shoe brands. There's a ton of detergents. There's a ton of deodorants. There's a ton of makeup. And especially in the makeup industry, I would say it's a great example. And when you look at the brands like Kim Kardashian or Rhode by Kylie Jenner, for example, there's so many brands out there, and you see how they're connected, those brands, to the person. And there's a reason for that. The storytelling is the reason for that. So going back to your question, I think just to make a difference in between smaller brands and bigger brands, and I will start with the bigger brands because I think that explains better the process. So, heritage brands typically start with a founder that has a vision, has an idea, and creates the brand. And then 100 years later, here we are. And, it's a big heritage brand. What happened in those 100 years is that vision and that big dream that person had in the first place, it kind of got lost because, that founder might have passed away. They're not in the business anymore. Maybe it's not part of the family, the business, or the brand. So there's maybe like 10, 20 different teams and management teams that have come through and out. And now here we are 100 years later, we're not really sure who we are anymore, right? And so this process is exactly what happens with smaller brands. There's someone who has an idea to create something, whatever that product is, even if it's a commodity product, it doesn't matter. There's a person who envisions that, who dreams that, and makes it happen, right? And actually, that is the story. Sometimes we look for things that are just not authentic. And actually, the real story is, well, I had this dream because of this, or I had this idea because I found this opportunity in the market. And then that is the story behind the brand. And then there's a product, and then it evolves over time. And so you build on that storytelling. I think that we tend to overcomplicate things. And I'm very passionate about making complex things simple. It's not as difficult. It's actually very, very simple. There's always a story behind anything that people do. There's a reason why things are happening. So just revisit that story. And obviously, that's why we're marketers. Romanticize it a little bit, make it nice, make it easy for people to digest. And there you have it. You have a story.
Yeah, I think people get worried thinking it needs to be, like you said, overthought, or that that maybe their reasons for the brand or their vision is not different enough. I think it comes back to, well, if it's authentic to you and if it is the story, then that's the story to tell. And
I would say there's another reason for it, is that if you're not making it unmatched, meaning is really just you and nobody else's, is then you're trying to match to other brands or people or benchmarks. And then it's not authentic anymore. The moment you think you need to be like someone else, whether it's you, like me as a person or me as a brand, then I think that's where things can go south, because then it's really not that authentic anymore. And consumers can tell that. Because that's where I think consumers have evolved as well, is they really get it. If you're not selling the real deal, they're going to get it. And then it's not going to work for you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You mentioned some brands there, like the Kardashian brands. And I think we're seeing it more and more with these creator influencer-led brands, right? And it's the ability to tap into an already engaged community. What's your take on, I think a lot of people think a lot of the brands of the future are going to be creator-led, influencer-led, or celebrity-led brands. What are your thoughts on those influencer, creator, celebrity-led brands? And do you think that's a trend that will continue to see kind of ramp up with more and more brands being started? If we think about the creator economy, more people are creators. I tend to think that a lot of the brands of the future, and we've already seen it, are going to be produced by and obviously supported by other teams who help it come to fruition, but really in that realm of being based on somebody's pre-built community, pre-built following.
Yeah, completely, 100%. I mean, I'm a big believer in that the future brands are, somehow led by a recognizable face. And I think that the debate is always that we've always had celebrity endorsements. But I think that the difference here is that it's not that it's a celebrity endorsement, it's that it's a celebrity-led brand, So if you look at, Fenty, Rihanna, if you look at, obviously, Kim Kardashian, she's built a $4 billion empire. And that is on the back of her personal brand. And I think, if you look at Gymshark, for example, Ben Francis, that's a great example of a brand created by a person. I think, though, the question there will be, how will they be able to scale? So again, coming back to what we said earlier, these people are alive today. They are the founders with a dream, right? But 100 years from now, they're not going to be there anymore. Unless we, we crack longevity or whatever, we're all living forever. But the point is, what's going to happen to those brands in 100 years from now? So I think that to create a community-led, celebrity-led, influencer-led brand today is really easy. And that is really what works. But if you want to then scale it to make it a global brand, if you want to, turn it into eventually a heritage brand, that will require different ways of doing business and different ways of building brand over the next decades. So that's where I think that even celebrity brands need to think about long-term plans.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because it's the launchpad superpower of the brand, but from a long-term perspective is a real potential downside.
Yeah, because you have Kim creating content for Skims now every day. And she's a big part of why Skims is selling, but what's going to happen in 50 years from now or 75 years from now? So I think that we're going to see, I'm not saying Skims specifically, but I think we're going to see a decline in a lot of these brands, the smaller ones, the ones that are not going to be able to sustain this level over time. And I think that this is why I'm very passionate about brand evolution. I think, someone like Kim Kardashian should be thinking about how her brands are going to evolve without her eventually, so that they can stand on their own, so that they're recognizable without that specific face. And I have so many examples of founder-led brands that, the founder is still there and the brand is recognizable because of the brand. I have a question about what's going to happen to that brand when the founder is not there anymore.
Very interesting take. Actually, it's funny with Gymshark as well, because I think they're a good example of, Ben's so young, he probably will be around for 100 years. I think he's only mid-20s or something.
And he's in shape.
Yeah, he is in shape. Actually, remember when Gymshark first launched, I was at a fitness expo. I don't know how many years ago this was. And just to see even the evolution of that brand and their products and approach, it's been pretty amazing. So kudos to Ben. Oana, I try and keep these relatively bite-sized per the name, but I feel like I could talk to you for hours and days, because I think we share a lot of the same philosophies when it comes to marketing in general. But I would love to kind of just get your take as you go into this new venture. What are you most excited about, and what do you want to see in terms of the shifts of who you work with as you think about this venture coming into fruition with the brands you're looking to work with and the marketers you're looking to work with?
First and foremost, I'm just excited about the fact that I can work with more brands, because I'm just a brand enthusiast. I just love branding overall. I love doing this, and I've always loved it. So that's the first thing. And I would say I'm very excited about the shifts in technology that are going to power and supercharge the evolution of brands moving forward. And I think that, as a marketer, I always want to be at the forefront of what is coming and what is new and what is possible. And there's so much happening. There's so much shifts that I think, so many opportunities that I think brands have in front of them. I'm just excited to uncover those opportunities and to be able to work with brands that want to do better for the future. They want to do better for the world. They want to do better for their consumers, and I'm biased because I have 2 small kids. I want to leave a better world than the one that I found, and I want to be a little bit a part of that process if I can in any way.
I love that. That's amazing. And you mentioned you're writing a book. So when can we expect the book to be released, and maybe give a precursor to, what we can expect from the book?
Yeah, so it's all around this topic of your unmatched positioning and how to find it. And I think this is the single biggest question that I always get from people. How do you find that positioning? How do you stay authentic? When you scale a brand, how do you stay who you are? Like when Gymshark goes completely global, how will they stay in that gym niche? Which I love that they're always talking about, we are a gym brand, we're not a sports brand. But when you want to scale that, when that becomes part of a share, like a big shareholder group, how are you going to maintain that authenticity? And that's just one example, but honestly, it happens to all of us. It happens to us as people. And funny enough, it happens equally to brands, because guess what? Behind brands, there's people. There's marketers who create the brands. The brands are just not entities that are created by themselves. So I want to uncover those kind of links in between how we as people operate as personal brands, and how, bigger corporations, bigger companies operate as brands, and what the links are in between those two kind of areas. Because I think that if we want to build better brands for the future, as I said at the beginning, we need to improve ourselves, and we need to understand ourselves first. The way I like to say it is, we as marketers need to find our voice, own our narrative, and then be able to build better brands for the future. If we're just simply, in an executional sort of, area of the business, and we stay there and we don't take ownership, especially with everything that is happening with AI, a lot of the automation that is going to take away a lot of that executional side of our roles, then what's left? What are we there for? So I think it's a great opportunity for marketers to find that voice and use it for good,
Inspiring. You're inspiring me, Oana, which I love.
You're inspiring me.
I'm very excited to read the book. Huge congratulations on, taking the leap of faith and, looking to build something for yourself, as I think anybody doing that deserves a huge amount of credit. I can't wait to see what you do with it. And just really appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a super cool conversation. Thank you.
It definitely has, of course. Thank you, Oana.